Do you want to find a stress-free way to buy your next car? Start at CarMax and shop your way. And if you want to browse with confidence, get pre-qualified online with no impact on your credit score and shop cars within your budget. From luxury cars to family rides, CarMax has options for almost every price range, including more than 25,000 cars priced under $25,000. So hey, want to get started? Just head to CarMax.com for details and get pre-qualified today. Want to drive? CarMax.
Thank you very much. Well, you shouldn't be worried about that because it's not going to happen. Well, and I understand there's a lot of very powerful entrenched interests in Ottawa that want me out because they don't want anything to change. They want to keep it exactly the way it is. And that's why they've been working so hard to get me out of this position. But I've got news for them. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stand up and fight for the millions of people who have put their faith in me, and we are going to keep fighting, and we're going to win, and we're going to restore this country, a country of promise for all Canadians.
Hey now!
Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road.
Hey now! Hi, friends. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. The voice you heard to kick off the pod today was none other than Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. There is a full court press by the mainstream media to try and get Pierre to step down, and you just heard him say it. He is not going anywhere. On this episode of the pod, and I got to be honest with you, I had a hell of a day. The radio show was plagued with technical difficulties, and what a mess. So I am happy to be here in my podcast studio, and today I'm going to bring you the very latest on what is going on in Canada and in the world, and I'm going to cover a whole wide variety of different topics, not the least of which is gas prices. A lot of people are struggling through this right now. These prices are really high. In Southern Ontario, where I come to you from every day, another 3-cent increase. But it was announced yesterday gas prices are about to go down a little bit here in Canada. The Conservatives have been calling on the federal government to cut the tax on gases. A lot of countries have done that to try and help out their citizens because these price fluctuations are ridiculous. So a lot of countries have cut taxes. Canada, very, very slow on this one. But yesterday, Prime Minister Carney came out and made the announcement he is going to cut some of the federal gas tax.
And we know that Canadians are feeling the pressures of everyday expenses right now. We know they need a boost today and a bridge to tomorrow. And that's why Canada's new government has been relentlessly focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. We started as we meant to go on. On the first day, we canceled the divisive consumer carbon tax, driving prices down on gas by 18 cents per litre. We cut taxes for 22 million middle-class Canadians, saving families up to $840. Cut taxes on first-time home buyers, saving up to $50,000 by the elimination of GST on new homes priced under $1 million. More than 12 million Canadians will have more money in their bank accounts this summer, up to $1,800 per family through our new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit.
Before the Prime Minister makes the actual announcement that he's going to cut the federal excise tax, it's going to save like 10 cents a litre. It's not a lot. I mean, we are still paying the industrial carbon tax on gas. We're still paying the tax on tax, which is the 5% GST on top of the total price, including the excise and federal and carbon taxes. And we still have to pay the HST overall. So the price of gas is still very, very, very heavily embedded in tax. But nonetheless, it's not nothing. 10 cents a litre, that'll help out a little bit. I just want to go back, though. I mean, the Prime Minister was talking there about all the different things that they've done to make life more affordable in Canada. And he's had a year to work on this. Do you find life is getting more affordable? Because one of the things that struck me as the Prime Minister was listing off those things, and he said on day one, we cut the divisive consumer carbon tax. He did that because he wanted to win the election, and he knew that that was the issue for Canadians. So he cut the legs out from underneath the Conservatives, and he cut that part of it. But he kept in the industrial carbon tax, which is why prices at the gas pumps are as high as they are. That also affects the price of food and so on and so forth. I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the targeted tax cut that he gave some people, low-income people last year, and I'm wondering how many people have actually benefited from all the different cuts that he's made. He cut the GST on purchases of new homes for first-time home buyers. These are very, very specific things that only certain people qualify for. It occurs to me that if the government wanted to make life more affordable for Canadians, they would cut taxes overall. Why won't they do that? How come when governments say, we're going to make life more affordable, we're going to give you the grocery rebate, for example? They'll do that, and some people will get some relief for a little while. Why not just cut the amount of tax they take from us in the first place? Wouldn't it make more sense to allow people to keep more of their own hard-earned money? To me, that would make a lot of sense. But there must be a reason that they do these taxes the way they are, these targeted tax cuts. And I have to think it's because they know not a lot of people can take advantage of it. And Ottawa loves revenue. They love money coming in the door because that gives them money to spend. I'm thinking this is all smoke and mirrors. I feel like the average Canadian isn't really getting the full benefit of these cuts that the government talks about. They make it seem like they've cut taxes dramatically. In reality, I don't think I've been affected by any one of these. I make a little too much money to get the tax cut from last year. The consumer carbon tax, I guess that helps, but the industrial carbon tax is still in place. So is the fuel standards regulations. That makes gas more expensive than it needs to be here in Canada and much more expensive than it is in America. I'm not a first-time home buyer, so I really don't know what's in it for me, and I'm wondering how many Canadians are actually getting some of these benefits. Anyway, let's get to the Prime Minister's announcement.
We all know that because of the war with Iran, fuel prices have increased sharply around the world, including right here in Canada. So we're taking more action to help build that bridge over short-term pressures. With the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Natural Resources, we're announcing today that Canada's new government will temporarily suspend the federal fuel excise tax from next Monday until Labor Day. We're also removing the fuel excise tax on aviation fuels. This will remove up to 10 cents per litre on gasoline and 4 cents per litre on diesel fuel.
Okay, there's the announcement from the Prime Minister. It's going to save us about 10 cents a litre. This is going to come at a massive hit to the coffers, though. I don't like the way Ottawa spends our money, but I also don't like the amount of debt they're accumulating. And I have to think that if they're taking in less money, that's not going to do anything to help out our debt. So I'm wondering if they're going to do any cuts to match the cut to revenue that they've just announced. But we'll wait and see what the government, particularly the finance minister, has to say about that. He is going to release it's weird, a fiscal update. And I don't know why we're doing fiscal updates in April. This is the time that the budget should be coming out. But of course, last year's budget didn't pass until a week left in the budget year. So strange how Ottawa is operating. I want to play just one more set of remarks for the Prime Minister, or from the Prime Minister here, because when he opened his speech yesterday, he talked a little bit about the by-elections the other night. Listen to this.
Yesterday, voters placed their trust in Canada's new government's plan. We accept their support with humility, determination, and a clear understanding of what this moment demands for our country.
Number one, the Prime Minister numerous times when he spoke to the media yesterday said Canada's new government, as if after the by-elections, it's a new government. In reality, it's not. He also seems to be picking up on a talking point that a lot of the mainstream media is really trying to run with here, in that these by-elections somehow gave him that majority government. In reality, that's simply not true. If you missed yesterday's episode when I talked about the by-elections, give it a listen, because I explained this. The 3 seats that they won during the by-election were not new seats. They already had those seats. Those were already counted in the government numbers. The by-elections were held because Bill Blair stepped down to become High Commissioner to the UK. Chrystia Freeland stepped down to be a special advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine. And the Supreme Court struck down the Terrebonne election result because it was by 1 vote and there were some irregularities there. Those were already Liberal seats. The reason Mark Carney has a majority is because of those backroom deals that he made with the floor crossers. And I'm hearing there's going to be more, too. I mean, normally I don't give much credibility to the rumors that float around about floor crossers, but I'm hearing from a few people that I trust a little bit more, not the least of which is Brian Lilly, a writer at the Toronto Sun, who has published an article this morning saying that there may be more that are going to cross the floor. There's probably some members of parliament on the conservative side that don't have very high ethical standards and are easily bought, that are probably looking over and thinking, well, we're not going to have an election for 3 years anyway, so I might as well join the government and suck as many perks as I can out of the government, get myself some nice attention, and then I'll deal with the fallout with my voters when we actually do have an election again. I don't know. I'm really not sure if that's true or not, but he's suggesting, Brian is anyway, there may be more that'll cross the floor. I don't know if that's true. We'll deal with it when it happens, if it happens. In the meantime, it's a very narrow majority government for the federal Liberals. The Prime Minister calling it a new government. It's not. And no, it was not achieved through by-elections. It was achieved through floor crossing. Just want to clear all that up because what's going out there is very, very misleading. I'm going to do a little bit of the Q&A and then a fellow podcaster I want to give a little credit to. First off, Prime Minister Carney.
Now that you secured a parliamentary majority, do you have the mandate you need to govern, or will you call in an election in response to those who suggest the majority is not legitimate?
Well, I'd refer to my earlier answer. We live in a parliamentary democracy. Canadians elect deputies. Deputies vote with their conscience and support the program that they see best for their constituents and for the country. We do have a parliamentary majority now, and that is the product in the last 24 hours of strong support, increasing support for those deputies, the Liberal candidates, in those three ridings.
So not considering calling an election?
Not considering calling an election. Absolutely. I think very clearly Canadians want government to govern, to take action on immediate concerns such as today, which is what we're doing on affordability. And I would note that the first thing we're doing as a minority government is continuing to attack affordability challenges that we know Canadians are facing while we're building a stronger economy. So we have that ability to move forward. We'll continue to work with Parliament in order to put our plan in action.
The Prime Minister is really, really, really trying to sell this as legitimate. Hey, parliamentarians are allowed to vote their conscience. And while generally speaking they are, we've never been in a situation in our entire history where a government has used whatever means necessary to lure over opposition members to give them a majority when they didn't win a majority at the polls. The Prime Minister is trying everything he can to try and smooth this over and make it seem like it's okay. But generally speaking, the people that I hear from anyway think this doesn't pass the smell test. Think the Prime Minister has gone too far in his quest for power. And they're wondering, what the hell does he want this power so badly for? What is it that he wants to do that he needs a majority but cannot come back to the voters to get a majority? And does he believe the polls? A lot of people feel the polls are inaccurate for the most part. They feel like there is really not that big a gap between the federal Liberals and the federal Conservatives. But it's the media's job to try and discredit Pierre Poilievre and get him to step down. That would be the greatest day in the last decade for the Liberals, because Pierre Poilievre is the one who's put up the biggest fight. He got rid of Justin Trudeau. He got rid of the federal carbon tax. He is going to continue going after Liberal policies that make life more expensive. The Liberals don't like that. In fact, I played it off the top of the pod. Let's do it one more time. Pierre Poilievre insisting, as much as the Liberals and the media want him gone, he's not going.
Thank you very much. Well, you shouldn't be worried about that because it's not going to happen. Well, and I understand there's a lot of very powerful entrenched interests in Ottawa that want me out because they don't want anything to change. They want to keep it exactly the way it is. And that's why they've been working so hard to get me out of this position. But I've got news for them. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stand up and fight for the millions of people who have put their faith in me, and we are going to keep fighting, and we're going to win, and we're going to restore this country, a country of promise for all Canadians.
I believe him. I think he is eventually going to win. I don't know when we're going to have an election, but I'm pretty sure it'll be the last one for Mark Carney, if I had to guess. You know what? I'm going to leave the Prime Minister for there. He made the announcement. They're going to cut the excise tax on gas starting Monday. That'll last until Labor Day. Good enough. 10 cents is better than nothing. It's just, I feel like they could have gone a lot more if they really did want to try and make life more affordable. Now, one thing I want to point out before I move on here is the federal Liberals, they're caught up in a lot of ethical conundrums. You know, this is a government that stayed in power for a long time, lecturing Canadians about climate change. Well, since Carney came in, he did get rid of the consumer portion of the carbon tax. Now he's lowering taxes on gas, and the theory is that'll make people drive more. I don't think it is. I don't think because people are saving 10 cents a liter, they're about to start going on cross-country road trips. But this government has never liked people driving. Let's go back to 2 summers ago. This was the federal government lecturing Canadians about driving and doing road trips.
Mr. Speaker, good news, kids. You can take a summer fun time vacation where you're locked in a car for 10 consecutive days, nonstop with no bathroom breaks, and the Conservatives have a plan for you to have that summertime fun. And the cost? Give up the future of the planet. Right? Don't worry, kids, about climate change. Don't worry about taking action on the planet. Enjoy your 10 hours in the car and let the planet burn.
That was then Federal Health Minister Mark Holland lecturing Canadians and taunting the Conservatives when even then they suggested that we need to give people a break at the pumps. That was what the Liberals did. They tried to gaslight Canadians into thinking the planet is literally going to burn if you go on a road trip. I wonder what those ones, the real hardcore environmentalists in the Liberal Party, they must be asking themselves, what the hell is going on here? They brought in Marilyn Gladu. Now they're cutting the tax on gas, even if it's just a little bit. That is very much against traditional, typical Liberal ideology. At some point, I'm wondering, are any Liberal backbenchers going to grow a backbone and say, you know what? This is not what I promised my constituents. This is not what I told them a Liberal government would do. When are they going to stand up to this government and say, you know what? This is contrary to our party values. This is contrary to what we believe in. When is that moment coming? I'm wondering. Friends, I'm not going to leave the politics there because I've got a whole bunch of committee audio that I want to play for you, and it's on some really, really interesting subjects. Before I get to that, just 2 more things that I want to play for you. One of the talking heads that you see on the CBC regularly, especially on the At Issue panel, is Andrew Coyne. He's a writer for, I believe, the Globe and Mail. Andrew was doing a speech recently, and he talked about floor crossers. Now, keep in mind, in order to be on the At Issue panel, I'm assuming it's a requirement that you must be a stalwart supporter of the Liberal Party, because they all seem to be anyway. Well, Andrew seems to be going against the grain a little bit. Even he, who has been an apologist for this Liberal government for 10 years, even he is calling out the floor crossing.
Then the votes are counted, and what does the voter see? He sees a parliament that looks nothing like what the voters cast their ballots for, with the distribution of seats between the parties bearing no resemblance to the division of opinion in the country. He sees that the MP he elects has no real role or responsibility, but to stand up and sit down when he's told. He sees a parliament that collectively has very little ability to hold governments to account. He sees that all power effectively resides in the office of the Prime Minister. In recent years, he's seen parties and leaders not only go back on their word or abandon their long-held convictions, but break their own laws. He's seen MPs being offered government jobs to cross the floor, and governments refusing to acknowledge confidence votes or proroguing Parliament rather than face one, or defying express orders of Parliament to surrender documents. And you ask, why doesn't he vote? Frankly, the only mystery in all this is why so many people still do.
Powerful words there from Andrew Coyne. I wanted to get that out there because I think that's an interesting point. I'm surprised it's coming from someone as prominent on the left, but it's true. What Andrew said is true. There's a lot of cynicism in politics right now. There's a lot of people wondering, does my vote even count? Is it even worth voting? Well, my message to you, and I'd refer you back to yesterday's pod as well, when I read you a statement from Melissa Lantsman, the deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. That's what they want. They want you to give up. They want you to feel like your vote doesn't matter so that you stop doing that. They don't want your vote unless you're going to vote for Liberals. They're trying to suppress your vote by telling you your vote doesn't matter. This is the time when you actually need to get engaged. You need to get involved and you need to pay attention. I told you that I wanted to give a shout out and credit here to a fellow podcaster, someone that I like a lot, Jasmine Lane. I'm sure you're familiar with her, very popular on social media. She has sat down to do an interview with the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra. Looks like a good interview. I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but Jasmine did post a teaser, and parts of this I find very interesting, and I'm hoping that when the whole interview drops, maybe you'll check it out. Here's just a little sample of Jasmine talking to the ambassador.
You know, and I love how it gets twisted here in Canada.
I don't even think you're going to answer this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel as though there is something happening intentionally, or is it actually just a really intense negotiation and it's normal for this to kind of be the rhetoric and fallout?
No, actually, it's not an intense negotiation. Okay, there really have been no serious negotiations since October of last year, and that's now betrayal.
Okay, that's all you get. Jasmine is going to release that whenever she's ready. It's her podcast, but I think it's great. It's a good guest, Pete Hoekstra, and I still think we need to be talking about what's going on with the Americans. I'm not ready to let that one die yet. Mark Carney wants to align Canada with the Chinese. He wants us to be part of the new world order led by China. What about the Americans? Are we just throwing that deal out? Because the government is still trying to let on that we're working on this. We're trying to get a deal with the Americans. We're going to get the best deal possible for Canada. Well, there's the American ambassador saying they're not. We're not. And they haven't even tried since October. There is no intense negotiation going on. Nothing is happening. We are no closer to resolving the situation with the Americans. He also goes on to say, by the way, they really want a deal. They don't want this back and forth. They don't want American alcohol banned in the LCBO and liquor stores across Canada. They don't want all this tension. They want to work out a deal. It's Canada that's holding this up, and that's something that I've suspected for a very long time. Friends, I told you I had some committee audio that I want to play for you. This is some of my favorite audio to play because in the committee, you certainly learn a lot more because there's less ways to avoid answering a question. In this one, great Conservative member of Parliament, Rachel Thomas. She's talking about this Google Media Fund. You'll probably realize that a lot of the Meta platforms have banned news on there. I think that is a complete and total tragedy. Canadians, where we know they are on social media, cannot get news, cannot get informed on the biggest platforms in the world. It's crazy. Now, the government tried to lead a shakedown of these digital tech companies saying, hey, we've got a media here in Canada. And if somebody, some user on, say, X, wants to share an article from the Toronto Sun on X, the Toronto Sun should actually get some money for that because it's their content. Now, I vehemently disagree with that position, just so you know. I think that if a user shares something, that's on them. I also think the media outlet benefits from that because the social media platform offers a much bigger audience and people may see the article whereas they otherwise wouldn't have. That media company can monetize how many people are clicking on that article. They can get money from that, but they didn't want to do it that way. They didn't. They wanted to shake down the big tech companies and try and claim that a user sharing a link about a news story on the platform is stealing that media outlet's content. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Well, we're still not resolved on that issue. There's still some tech platforms that don't allow news on there. Again, I think that is a colossal tragedy and one of the reasons that so many Canadians are not fully informed on the issues. What about Google, though? Google announced they had worked out a deal with the media publishers. It was for $100 million. And Rachel Thomas, the member of Parliament, in this committee hearing, I believe this is the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, she asks, how did that $100 million fund come to be and how do they decide who gets the money?
So Bill C-18 actually never came into effect. Google actually made a deal with the government that they would be exempt for 5 years as long as they created a fund of $100 million. per year that would go through the collective and then be distributed to news organizations. So interestingly enough, Bill C-18 was a flopped bill and ends up being shelved because it applies to no one. Now, this fund is in effect for a total of 5 years before, of course, the government will have to revisit this. Now, you as a collective have been put in place by who?
Google they decided to work with the collective to distribute the funding. So there was a collective that was formed, and then
who formed the collective?
You're looking for the names of the founding board members?
So Google was required to create a fund of $100 million.
Yeah.
And they decided that an entity called a collective would be responsible for rolling out that money. Who put that collective in place? Who was the initiator of the terms of reference?
So there was a collective that formed, and they put in
didn't just appear out of nowhere. Who formed that collective?
It wasn't the law.
I think that what I'm trying to answer your question, but essentially there was several proposals that Google received in terms of how they would be administering the funding. One of the proposals was put together by a group of journalists, of news producers, that formed a collective. Google ended up choosing this collective. So these founding board members, and I'm happy to send you the list of names if you like, following this session, they created the organization, they incorporated a not-for-profit, they set up the governance structures, and then an elected board was put into place to represent the entire news sector, and the founding board termed out. And so the first meeting of the elected board was in April 2025, and that's who runs the organization.
So that original collective that was put together to work with Google to roll this out, you said that there was a group of journalists that got together and formed this collective. That was just organic, or that was the minister that initiated that, or that was Google that initiated that? Who initiated that? Journalists just magically decided that they were going to join together in one room and form a collective? Like, how did that happen?
There was a group of people that began a conversation about how they would like to see the Google money administered.
Where did that group come from?
The origins of how this conversation started, it was before I was at the CJC. I've only been there for a year, so this predates my time there. But there was various journalists that started a conversation about how they would like to see the Google money dispersed, what are some of the guiding principles they would like to introduce.
I'm going to cut this off here. I just want to explain to you what's going on, and I actually kind of feel bad for this witness here. Her name is Sarah Spring. She's from the Canadian Journalism Collective. What Rachel Thomas, the member of Parliament, what she's trying to get at here is, so the government said, if you give away $100 million to news outlets, you can bypass this new legislation for 5 years. So who decided who was going to get the money? And this collective of journalists all stood up and said, we'll help you get rid of it. Well, sure, it's $100 million. I'd like to help decide how that gets spent, too. So they all got together. And all Rachel's trying to find out here is, well, did that happen organically? Did the minister's office coordinate that? Did Google go to the news publishers and say, hey, they say we're ripping you guys off and we have to give you $100 million. How do you want to divvy it up? A lot of news outlets got paid a lot of money. Was it distributed fairly? Was it based on readership and viewership and views? Or was it just legacy media that got all that money from Google? And was it for a good reason in the first place? That's a fishy fund, friends, and that's coming from someone who's in the media. I'm really glad Rachel is asking questions like that. I know it was a longer clip than I typically play, but I'm glad you got to hear some of that, and I'm going to pay attention to this committee because I'd like to know more about that, and I'd like to know why we still don't have news on meta platforms in Canada. It's crazy. I also want to play for you an update here. One of the things that I've talked about several times on the pod is the Health Committee. See, the government, the Liberals, they tried to create this program called Prescribe IT. And it was basically to send your prescription info from the doctor to the pharmacist and so on. And then they realized, wait, we already have a system that does that. But they spent $250 million before they shut down the Prescribe IT program. So, Member of Parliament for Kitchener South Hespeler, Dr. Matt Strauss, he has been trying to get to the bottom of this and figure out what happened to that $250 million. He's asked multiple times, and the government, the Liberals, they continue to filibuster so that they don't have to hand that over. Here's a little bit of Matt Strauss talking about this yesterday in Ottawa.
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, I've come over to the government side temporarily to offer my question today because I think it is a common sense question. I think that it is a bipartisan question. I think that anybody on the Liberal side of the House, on the Conservative side of the House, should be able to ask this sort of question and get a reasonable response. I certainly didn't want to be here tonight, Mr. Speaker. I asked what I thought was a very reasonable question of my friend, the Parliamentary Secretary for Health. She didn't really answer it, and that's why I'm here tonight. I'm going to try asking it again, and I'm going to beg her to answer it this time. So for folks following at home, the Liberal government in the last Parliament, they spent $250 million on a program called Prescribe IT with the laudable goal of making it easier for physicians such as myself to send prescriptions to the pharmacy. I'm from the Waterloo region. I went to the University of Waterloo. A lot of my friends are tech entrepreneurs and founders. Many of them are senior software developers at this stage of my life. I've asked them, how much money should this sort of thing cost? They've said maybe $1 million, maximum $5 million. There is no way this should have cost $250 million. They were spraying money from a fire hose. Incredible to spend $250 million on something that should have cost 250 times less. But what's worse is the program didn't work. They know that it didn't work. That's why they've canceled it. So after spending $250 million of taxpayer money on something that didn't work, they're canceling it. The taxpayer's getting nothing. And I know that my friend, the Parliamentary Secretary of Health, I know she wasn't here in the last Parliament. She didn't sign that contract. The Prime Minister wasn't here. There's no blame in it for either of them, but as a country, as a Parliament, we need to get to the bottom of this. Like, it's Parliament's sacred duty to protect the taxpayer's dollar. 250 million of them is a lot. So we would like to see that contract. We put forward a motion at the Health Committee to just see the contract. The Government of Canada entered into that contract on behalf of the taxpayers, blew 250 million of their dollars. I think our bosses, the taxpayers, should get to see what the heck happened. My colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary for Health, spent 2 hours of all of our time filibustering that motion so as to not produce the document. I saw the Prime Minister today gave a speech to reporters where he said he doesn't like filibustering. He criticized some Conservative members for speaking about cats and dogs. Does the Prime Minister know she's been filibustering this document production order? Is he happy with it? Why is she doing it? Why won't she stop? Why won't she just let the taxpayers see this contract so we can all stop this sort of waste and mismanagement from going forward in the future under this new government that they like to call themselves? So I'm sitting close to her. I can see that she has prepared remarks. I'm begging her to put them away and just answer the very simple question to taxpayers. Why won't she let us, as Canadians, as taxpayers, as residents in an open society, why won't she just let us see that contract, please?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend and colleague from Kitchener South Hespeler for his question, although he temporarily crossed the floor, although I hope it's more permanent than this.
I'm going to cut it off. She doesn't answer. She doesn't show the contract. Isn't the way Matt put that perfectly reasonable? Listen, nobody's in trouble here at the moment. These are previous parliamentarians that did it. It was a different prime minister, different health minister. But the taxpayers have a right to know why this cost 250 times more than it should have, why we have nothing to show for it, where did the money go, who got rich. That's all we want to know. Show us the contract. They've been ordered to show the contract. They're not going to do it. That's the kind of juvenile, petty stuff that's going on in Ottawa. There is zero accountability. This is our money. Our money. We worked our backs off to pay that much money in tax, and they just throw it around like that. And then when we ask for a simple explanation, they won't even level with us. They won't tell us anything. I'm going to move on. I'm playing some committee audio today, and I've got another one here that I think you should hear. This is Member of Parliament Tamara Jensen. She is from, let's see here, is she from British Columbia? I think she's a British Columbia Member of Parliament. This one is on MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying.
If you look in the Death Review Committee report, there was a Mr. A, experienced suffering, functional decline, and he was given MAID, and there was no pathological findings found for his decline other than his COVID-19 shot. So there are cases. And this goes to my question in regards to non-compliance. So Ms. Lawley, I'll direct it to you. If you wanted to design a system that quietly looks the other way, I'm not sure you could do it much better than what we're seeing here. In Ontario alone, the coroner tracked 428 possible criminal code violations in assisted dying cases over 5 years, 178 in a single year, and out of all of those cases, everyone involving the ending of a human life. Only 4 were referred to a regulatory body, and not one was reported to police, not one. Now, in any other area of law, financial crime, assault, even paperwork violations, hundreds of potential criminal code breaches would trigger investigations, headlines, and consequences. But here, where the stakes are literally life and death, the system seems to do the opposite. It absorbs it, redirects it, keeps it away from the very institutions designed to enforce the law. And then we hear something even more troubling. When we ask basic reasonable questions of this government, which provinces have oversight? Who's reviewing the cases? Are there checks before or after a life is ended? The answer we got back from them is essentially, we don't know, that's up to the provinces. So let's put that together. Hundreds of possible violations, no police involvement, no national tracking, and no clear line of accountability. And now, with some of the most complex, subjective, and difficult to diagnose cases in all of medicine, mental illness, we are being told this same system will somehow suddenly function just fine. Canadians aren't naive. They can see when a system is built to enforce the rules and when it's built to avoid asking too many questions. Right now, this looks like a system that has been structured, intentionally or not, to keep scrutiny at arm's length and enforcement and safeguard out of the room. So before we expand this any further, we need to be honest about what's already happening. And I point to Keanu's case. He did not move to BC. He flew to BC. That's why we're here in this review committee. And the more testimony we hear, the more it seems clear that we're not ready and likely never to be ready to expand this to those whose sole underlying condition is mental illness. Is there anything you can say to demonstrate proof of the federal government or Department of Health dealing with hundreds of compliance failures?
I would say to, very valid public interest concerns around safeguards and oversight, that you are right. It is to take another member's use. There is a patchwork of approach to oversight that the federal government does not lead. It is really within the jurisdictions to set up their oversight mechanisms, and they're all slightly different. I would say the one thing about oversight is that the opportunities that the jurisdictions have for kind of the continuous process improvement do play out in our FPT working level. We are sharing that information with each other, and we are learning from each other.
Thank you.
We're still making this up as we go. We have MAID, and that's fine. I don't disagree with the concept of MAID. If somebody has a condition where they're going to suffer, where it is uncurable or inoperable, or it's going to lead to a horrible quality of life, I think that while someone has the ability to make that decision consciously, they should be able to make that decision in consultation with their physician and family and what have you. But they want to expand it to people who have mental health conditions. And all that question was asking, I know it was a very wordy question, but it was asking what oversight is in place here, and why, when there are suspicious cases of MAID, is no one investigating? The answer is simple. We have a patchwork of oversight that varies from province to province. That's going to make it incredibly difficult to track MAID and what's going on. And the last part of the question was simple, is that intentional? Have you intentionally set this up in a way that it's very difficult to get answers on how MAID is being administered and what oversight is in place? And the answer was basically an acknowledgement that, yeah, that's basically what's going on. It's a very confusing, convoluted system. And yes, it is very difficult to get information in a timely way. That's a problem. We're talking about life and death here. MAID is now one of the leading killers of Canadians. MAID is. Before we expand it to people who have no physical health conditions whatsoever, they have a mental health condition. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about how MAID expands and whether or not we should expand it even more. One of the arguments is if we don't expand MAID to people with mental health conditions, they might commit suicide. I mean, that's what MAID is. It's physician assisted, but it's still suicide. We need to talk more about MAID and make sure that this is being done in a responsible way. One last thing here. While I'm doing committee audio, although this is not actually from the committee hearing, this is a news scrum that happened after a committee hearing. I want to play for you Conservative Member of Parliament Michael Barrett. He is trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with this ALTO high-speed rail line. It recently came out through media reports that the finance minister, François-Philippe Champagne, his wife or partner, is one of the VPs at ALTO. And then there was a big scramble in Ottawa to cover up and say, oh, well, it's okay. He recused himself. He's not part of the decision-making process because we know there's a conflict of interest there, or perceived one. It's not perceived. That's absolutely a conflict of interest, by the way. Well, we need to know a little bit more about this because, frankly, this went on for a while before anyone knew that that was the case, that the finance minister is living with one of the VPs at ALTO, and the finance minister is going to be the one who hands over $90 billion to ALTO. Michael Barrett held that media scrum yesterday. Let's hear what he has to say.
Serious questions that Canadians have coming out of the revelation about the Liberal finance minister's connection to executives at ALTO. Now, the $90 billion ALTO project is the largest infrastructure project in Canadian history. And it came to light over the past week that the Liberal finance minister, Champagne, he has a spouse in the vice president of ALTO, this Crown Corporation. Now, when this came to light, Minister Champagne said that he had proactively recused himself from decisions, discussions, and debates concerning ALTO and had put in place an informal conflict of interest screen in his office, and that he notified Prime Minister Carney of this in the fall. The problem is that we've seen over the period of time that ALTO has since been included in legislation such as the Budget Implementation Act, that the minister has participated in debates, discussions, and would seem to have participated in decisions, but ultimately did vote not just for the Budget Implementation Act, but also when the House was given the opportunity to remove the creation of the High-Speed Rail Network Act from the Budget Implementation Act, the minister voted with the government to protect this act, to the creation of this act, and to protect ALTO. And with a project of this magnitude, it's important that Canadians are able to have confidence that everything is above board. There isn't a cloud of suspicion, of conflict of interest, and so today, Conservatives are announcing that we are going to be calling for a committee investigation at the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics to have the minister come before committee to answer questions, to have the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner come before committee to answer questions, along with executives, including the Chief Executive Officer of ALTO.
Isn't that perfectly reasonable? I don't think anybody would disagree with that. That is a perfectly reasonable request. By the way, what he said is true. The finance minister claims he proactively recused himself from this situation. Well, recusal would mean you wouldn't participate in this decision-making process at all. You certainly wouldn't be administering any money or consult on development or design or anything like that. If you're recused, you're supposed to be out. Well, the finance minister put it in the budget for ALTO. That's how they got their money. And then the finance minister, because we were in a minority government situation, voted for the Budget Implementation Act. So even though he proactively recused himself, he still voted directly in the House of Commons for the budget, which gives him the money for ALTO. That in itself is a massive conflict of interest. Now, he probably feels like he had to do it. He had to vote for it. He's the finance minister. It's a minority government. They could have lost their power. He had to vote. That's what he's going to say. No, he didn't. If you recuse yourself, it's for a reason. You must recuse yourself if you have a conflict of interest. Would you agree that being married to the vice president of the company that's getting $90 billion from the government, if you're the finance minister, you have a conflict of interest? If you woke up in bed beside her and had dinner across the table from her, that's probably a conflict of interest, Francois. Probably is. I don't think he's going to appear in front of this committee, and if he does, he's probably going to obstruct. He is probably going to do whatever he has to do to not answer questions, if I had to guess. But maybe he'll prove me wrong, and we'll see somebody on that side of the house have some integrity and answer questions honestly, because this is a matter of ethics, and this is taxpayer money that we're talking about again. $90 billion. If everything's above board, nobody should be afraid to answer questions. Nobody should be afraid of scrutiny. They don't want to do that, and I have to think it's because this isn't above board, and this is probably not ethical. Again, friends, have yourselves a great day. I appreciate your time so much. We are midway through the week, and I'm hoping to lighten it up a little bit as we get a little closer to the weekend. I am going to do a listener DMs episode on Friday. I've already been inundated with messages for Friday. I don't know how many more I can take, but if you've got something that is on your mind that you want me to include on Friday, go ahead and send that in. Tomorrow, like I said, I'll do a couple of lighter things, and whatever else comes out of today, I will have for you right here tomorrow on Scott Fox After 9.
Oh, yeah.